The old church bells of Southwark chimed 2 in the morning as Amara Okafor stood in her grandmother's kitchen, flour dusting her dark hands like stardust. The therapeutic bakery she'd inherited glowed softly in the pre-dawn darkness, its windows casting golden rectangles onto the empty cobblestones of Borough Market. While London slept, Amara worked her quiet magic, channeling restless energy and unspoken longings into pastries that could heal hearts. She moved with practiced grace between her workstation and the massive stone oven that had been, breathing warmth into this space for over a century. Tonight, like every night, insomnia had driven her here to create what she couldn't quite name, something that felt like hope, tasted like comfort, and carried the weight of wishes whispered into rising dough. "What are you trying to tell me tonight, Nana?" She whispered to the photograph of her grandmother that watched over the kitchen. Adunni Okafor smiled back from the frame, her eyes holding secrets of healing herbs and ancient knowledge passed down through generations of women who understood that food could be medicine. That intention could be infused into every grain of sugar. Amara's fingers worked cardamom pods, releasing their warm, complex fragrance into the air already thick with vanilla and rose water. Her grandmother had taught her that cardamom opened the heart, that rose petals called in love, that honey held the sweetness of all good things yet to come. But knowing the ingredients and feeling their power work through her own life were two very different things. The therapeutic bakery had become her sanctuary and her prison. By day, customers lined up for her famous comforts cones that somehow knew exactly what each person carried. Her healing honey cakes had reputation for mending broken hearts, while her peace pastries could soothe the most anxious spirits. Food critics had written articles about her inexplicable gift for emotional pastry, but none of them understood that Amara baked her own loneliness into every creation, hoping that somewhere in London, someone might taste it and recognize her heart. She needed tonight's batch of midnight miracle muffins with extra tenderness, working cinnamon and nutmeg into dough that seemed to shimmer with possibility. Each fold and turn carried her yearning for someone who would see beyond the successful business owner to the woman who worked through her sleepless nights, who talked to herbs like old friends, who still believed in magic despite a world that often felt cold and practical. The kitchen's warmth wrapped around her like an embrace as she shaped the dough with hands that knew healing touch. Steam rose from the tea kettle where she'd steeped chamomile and lavender, the gentle herbs her grandmother had used to call in peaceful dreams. But Amara's dreams were rarely peaceful. They were filled with hands reaching for hers across marble counters, with laughter echoing in her empty flat above the bakery, with someone understanding the careful intention behind every recipe. As she slid the muffins into the oven, Amara caught her reflection in the darkened window flower in her curly hair, apron tied snugly around her curves, eyes bright with the intensity that came with creating something meaningful in the quiet hours when the rest of the world surrendered to sleep. She looked like a woman waiting for something, though she couldn't quite name what. The display case already held tonight's offerings: lavender shortbread cookies that promised sweet dreams, ginger molasses squares infused with warming love, and her signature soulmates cones, though she'd never quite worked up the courage to taste one herself, afraid of what her own heart might reveal. Outside, Borough Market slept peacefully, its daytime bustle replaced by the gentle rhythm of a city breathing softly. Amara loved these hours when London belonged to night shift workers, insomniacs, and dreamers like herself, people who understood that some of life's most important work happened in the spaces between sunset and sunrise. She lit the small votive candles arranged around her workspace, each one blessed with oils her grandmother had taught her to blend. The flames danced, casting moving shadows that seemed to dance with possibility. Tonight felt different somehow, charged with an energy that made her skin tingle and her heart beat a little faster. Something was coming, shifting in the spaces between what was and what could be. The oven timer hadn't chimed yet, but already the kitchen filled with the aroma of tonight's miracles in progress, sweet and warm and somehow expectant. As if even the pastries themselves were waiting for something wonderful to unfold. Amara wiped her hands on her apron and stepped outside into the small courtyard garden she'd cultivated behind the bakery, where moonlight silvered the herbs that would find their way into tomorrow's healing creations, standing among the lavender and rosemary, breathing in night air perfumed with possibility. Amara closed her eyes and made the same wish she'd been making for months, that someone would walk into her bakery and see not just the successful business or the healing pastries, but the woman behind the magic, the heart that poured itself into every creation. The dreams that rose with each batch of bread. Tomorrow would bring the usual rush of customers. The grateful smiles, the whispered stories of how her pastries had somehow known exactly what each person needed. But tonight, in the gentle darkness that cradled her small kingdom of flour and sweetness, Amara allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, someone was out there looking for exactly the kind of magic she had to offer. The church bells chimed the quarter hour, and she returned to her kitchen, ready to create whatever the night had in store. Sebastian Romano had been walking the empty streets of London for 3 hours, his thoughts as restless as his feet on the cobblestones. The weight of his father's expectations pressed against his chest like a stone, making it impossible to sleep. Impossible to pretend that taking over Romano and Sons Bakery felt like anything other than a beautiful cage. His family's empire stretched across 3 neighborhoods. Their traditional Italian pastries beloved by generations of customers. But Sebastian's heart pulled him toward something different, artisanal creations that told stories, pastries that carried meaning beyond mere sustenance. His father called it newfangled nonsense, but Sebastian felt it like a calling he couldn't ignore. That's how he found himself wandering through Borough Market at 2:30 in the morning, drawn by an inexplicable restlessness that felt almost like hunger, not for food, but for something he couldn't name. The market's usual chaos had settled into peaceful quiet. Vendors' stalls shuttered for the night, leaving only the eternal rhythm of London's heartbeat echoing off ancient stones. Then he saw the light, a warm, golden glow spilled from the windows of a bakery he'd never noticed before. Though he'd walked these streets countless times, the soft radiance seemed to pulse gently, like a beacon calling to lost souls. And Sebastian felt his feet carry him forward without conscious decision as he approached. The most incredible aromas began to reach him, not just the expected vanilla and butter, but something deeper, more complex. Cardamom and rose water danced together on the night air, accompanied by hints of honey and herbs that seemed to whisper promises of comfort and healing. His steps slowed as he neared the window, drawn by scents that spoke to something hungry in his soul. The display case visible through the glass held pastries that looked almost ethereal in the candlelight that flickered throughout the shop. Each creation seemed to glow with its own inner warmth, arranged with an artist's eye for beauty and a healer's understanding of what people truly needed. Delicate lavender cookies sat beside robust ginger squares, while scones dusted with what looked like actual starlight waited alongside muffins that seemed to shimmer with possibility. Sebastian pressed closer to the window, his breath fogging the glass as he tried to understand what he was seeing. These weren't just pastries, they were something more, something that made his heart race with recognition he couldn't explain. Each item in the display seemed to tell a story, to carry intention and meaning that reached through the window to touch something deep inside him. Movement in the kitchen beyond caught his attention, and his breath stopped entirely. A woman moved between workstations with grace that looked almost like dancing. Her dark skin glowing in the warm light, flour dusting her arms like blessing powder. She wore her curly hair pulled back loosely, revealing the elegant line of her neck as she bent over her work. Completely absorbed in what looked less like baking and more like practicing some ancient form of magic, Sebastian watched, transfixed as she lifted a batch of something golden from the oven, her face illuminated by the soft glow from within. She looked like a goddess of hearth and home, like the answer to questions he'd been asking his entire life without knowing it. There was something about the way she moved, the careful attention she paid to each creation, that spoke to the artist in him and awakened something that had been sleeping in his chest before he could think better of it. Sebastian found himself tapping gently on the glass. The woman looked up, startled, and their eyes met through the window. Time seemed to pause, suspended like sugar crystals in honey, as they stared at each other across the barrier of glass and circumstance. Her eyes were warm and deep, holding flecks of gold that caught the candlelight. And in them, Sebastian saw something that made his heart leap recognition, as if she'd been waiting for exactly this moment. Exactly this stranger to appear at her window in the small hours of morning. Amara set down her baking tray with hands that had begun to tremble slightly. The man at her window looked like he'd stepped from one of her midnight dreams, tall and lean with dark hair that caught the streetlight, eyes that seemed to hold centuries of gentle understanding. But it was something deeper that made her heart race the way he looked at her pastries with wonder, as if he could see the intention and love baked into every creation. She moved toward the door before she could second-guess herself, her feet carrying her forward on some instinct older than thought. Her hand turned the lock, and she pulled the door open to reveal the stranger who had somehow found his way to her sanctuary in the deepest part of night, where, "I'm technically closed," she said softly, though her voice held no conviction. The lie felt hollow when faced with eyes that looked at her like she was something miraculous. "I know," Sebastian replied, his voice warm and slightly rough from walking in the cold air. "I couldn't sleep, and he gestured helplessly at the glowing window behind her. "I've never seen anything like this." "It's beautiful. You can see it," Amara whispered, and Sebastian heard wonder in her voice. "The beauty, I mean. Most people just see pastries. These aren't just pastries," Sebastian said with certainty that surprised them both. They're like edible poems. Each one tells a story." The words hung in the night air between them, and Amara felt something shift in her chest, a recognition so profound it made her dizzy. This stranger understood. Without tasting a single creation, without knowing anything about her grandmother's traditions or the healing intentions she worked into every batch. He saw what she'd been trying to create all along. "Would you?" she began, then stopped, suddenly shy. "Would you like to come in? I was just making tea, and the midnight muffins should be ready soon." Sebastian's smile transformed his entire face, lighting him up from within like sunrise. "I'd like that very much," as he stepped across her threshold. Amara felt the night air follow him inside, bringing with it the scent of possibility and the electric charge that comes when two souls recognize something significant in each other. She led him to the small seating area she'd created near the window. where mismatched chairs and a tiny table held candles that cast dancing shadows on walls lined with herbs and photographs of her grandmother's recipes. "I'm Amara," she said, suddenly aware of how intimate it felt to share her name with this beautiful stranger in the golden cocoon of her midnight sanctuary. "Sebastian," he replied, and his name felt like music on her tongue, like something she'd been waiting her whole life to learn how to say. She busied herself preparing tea, hyper-aware of his presence behind her as he took in the details of her kingdom, the crystals arranged on windowsills, the bundles of herbs hanging from rafters, the handwritten recipes in her grandmother's careful script. When she turned to bring him a cup of chamomile tea steeped with rose petals and honey, she found him studying her grandmother's photograph with gentle reverence. "She taught you," he said. Not a question, but a statement of understanding. "Everything," Amara confirmed, settling into the chair across from him. "The recipes, the herbs, the intentions." "Intentions," Sebastian repeated thoughtfully, wrapping his hands around the warm cup. "That's what I felt from outside. Each pastry carries an intention." Their eyes met over steaming tea, and Amara felt her heart begin to race with a mixture of excitement and terror. No one had ever understood so quickly, so completely. It was like he could see straight into the heart of what she'd been trying to create. The healing she'd been trying to offer the world, one pastry at a time. The oven timer chimed softly, breaking the spell, and Amara rose to retrieve the midnight muffins. As she bent to pull them from the oven, she was acutely aware of Sebastian watching her, of the way the warm air from the oven made her skin glow, of how natural it felt to have him here in her sacred space. "What intention did you bake into these?" he asked as she set the golden muffins on a cooling rack. Amara felt heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the oven. "Connection," she admitted quietly. "I baked in the hope that someone would find me. Someone who could see you," Sebastian finished, his voice soft with understanding. "Yes," she whispered. The air between them shimmered with possibility as they sat in the candlelit bakery, sharing tea and newly formed understanding while London slept around them. Amara watched Sebastian's face as he took his first sip of her healing tea, saw his eyes widen with surprise and pleasure, and knew with sudden certainty that this beautiful stranger had been drawn to her window by something much more powerful than coincidence outside. The first hints of dawn began to touch the eastern sky, but inside Amara's bakery, time seemed suspended in the magical space between night and morning, between strangers and something deeper, between the life she'd known and whatever beautiful uncertainty was beginning to unfold. As the first muffin cooled enough to share, Amara found herself breaking it in half with trembling fingers, steam rising like small prayers into the candlelit air. She offered half to Sebastian, their fingertips brushing as he accepted it, and the brief contact sent warmth racing up her arm like liquid sunshine. "This feels almost sacred," Sebastian murmured, holding the still warm muffin like something precious. The golden interior glowed with flecks of cardamom and crystallized ginger. But there was something more, an almost visible shimmer that spoke of magic baked into every crumb. Nana always said that food prepared with intention becomes medicine for whatever ails the soul. Amara explained, settling back into her chair with her own half of the muffin. She could taste emotion in everything people cooked. Sadness made bread heavy, anger made spices too sharp. But love, she trailed off, suddenly self-conscious. "Love makes everything taste like coming home," Sebastian finished gently, taking a small bite. His eyes closed as flavor exploded across his tongue, not just the warm spices and sweet honey, but something deeper. Something that tasted like longing and hope and the quiet bravery it takes to keep creating beautiful things in the darkness. Amara watched his face transform with wonder and felt something crack open in her chest. "You really can taste it," she whispered. "The emotion, I mean." Sebastian opened his eyes, and they were bright with unshed tears. "I taste loneliness, but also hope so strong it makes my heart ache. And underneath it all, this incredible, powerful love for humanity. You put your whole heart into this muffin, didn't you?" Amara could only nod, overwhelmed by being seen so completely by this stranger who somehow wasn't a stranger at all. "I've never met anyone who could taste what I bake into things. Most people just say they're delicious and move on. Most people don't know how to listen with their tongues," Sebastian said, leaning forward slightly. "But I've spent my whole life trying to understand what makes some food transcendent and other food just fuel. My family thinks I'm crazy for caring so much about the artistry, the meaning behind what we create. Your family are bakers too." Sebastian's expression grew complicated, shadows crossing his features like clouds over sunlight. "Romano and Sons. We've been feeding London for 4 generations. Traditional Italian pastries, time-tested recipes, customers who've been coming to us since my great-grandfather first opened the doors." Amara set down her muffin, recognition dawning. "Romano and Sons on Bermondsey Street. The ones with the famous cannoli? You know us?" Sebastian asked, and she could hear something guarded in his voice now. "Hi, yes. Everyone in the baking community knows Romano and Sons. Your family's reputation is—" She paused, seeing how he braced himself. "Legendary. Your cannoli are spoken of with reverence. I've always admired the consistency, the way your family has kept the authentic techniques alive." Sebastian blinked, clearly having expected different words. "You're not going to tell me we were old-fashioned? Behind the times?" "Traditional doesn't mean outdated," Amara said firmly. "There's profound beauty in honoring the past, in keeping ancestral knowledge alive. I do the same thing with my grandmother's healing traditions. I just add my own understanding to what she taught me." Something in Sebastian's posture relaxed, and he looked at her with growing appreciation. "My father wants me to take over the business, but he won't let me add anything new to our offerings. Says our customers expect consistency, not experimentation. What would you add?" Amara asked, genuinely curious. Sebastian's face lit up like sunrise. "Seasonal pastries that connect people to the rhythm of the earth. Breads infused with herbs that support emotional healing. Desserts that tell stories of where the ingredients came from, of the hands that grew them." He paused, suddenly shy. "Things like what you create here. You want to heal people through food too," Amara said wonderingly. "I want to feed souls, not just bodies," Sebastian confirmed. "But try explaining that to a 70-year-old Italian patriarch who built his empire on never changing anything." They sat in comfortable understanding for a moment, sipping tea that had cooled to the perfect temperature while sharing muffins that seemed to grow more delicious with every bite. Amara found herself studying Sebastian's face in the candlelight, the strong line of his jaw, the gentle curve of his mouth. The way his dark eyes held depths she wanted to explore. "Tell me about your grandmother," Sebastian said softly. nodding toward the photograph that smiled down at them from its place of honor. Amara's face softened with love and grief intertwined. Adunni Okafor. She came to London from Nigeria when she was 20, carrying nothing but her grandmother's recipes and an absolute certainty that food could heal whatever hurt people carried. She opened this bakery 50 years ago, when Borough Market was still rough around the edges. She built all this? Sebastian gestured at the herb-lined walls, the carefully arranged crystals, the comfortable warmth that seemed to emanate from every corner. She built a community, Amara corrected. People came here not just for bread, but for the way she listened to their troubles while she kneaded dough. For the special teas she'd brew when they were sick. For the way she somehow knew exactly what each person needed to feel whole again. And she taught you all of that? She tried to, Amara said with a rueful smile. But I'm still learning. Some nights I feel her presence so strongly, like she's guiding my hands as I work. Other nights I feel like I'm fumbling through recipes I only half understand. Hoping I don't disappoint the people who trust me to take care of them, Sebastian reached across the small table, his fingers finding hers with gentle certainty. The contact sent electricity racing up her arm, but more than that, it felt like coming home. From what I tasted in that muffin, you're not fumbling at all. You're creating magic. Amara looked down at their joined hands, her flour-dusted fingers intertwined with his longer, elegant ones, and felt something shift inside her chest, like a door opening after years of being locked. I've been so lonely, she whispered, the admission surprising her with its honesty. Running this place by myself, trying to carry on Nana's work, wondering if anyone would ever understand what I'm trying to do. I understand, Sebastian said with quiet intensity. I've been lonely too, in the middle of a family business surrounded by people who love me but don't see who I really am. Walking the streets at night because I couldn't sleep, couldn't settle. Feeling like some part of me was missing. Their eyes met and held. And Amara felt something pass between them, a recognition so deep it made her dizzy. This beautiful stranger with his gentle hands and artist's soul. This man who could taste her intentions in her pastries and see the healing work she'd poured her life into. Who understood loneliness and the hunger to create meaning through food. Sebastian, she began. Not sure what she wanted to say, only knowing that his name felt like a prayer on her lips. I know, he said softly, his thumb tracing gentle circles on the back of her hand. I feel it too. The candles flickered around them, casting dancing shadows that seemed to celebrate this moment of connection, of two souls recognizing each other across the space that had kept them separate. Outside, London continued its ancient rhythm. But inside the warm sanctuary of Amara's bakery, time moved differently. Measured in heartbeats and shared breath and the growing certainty that something beautiful was beginning to bloom. Amara pulled her hands free, but only to reach for the teapot. More tea? She offered, though what she really meant was stay. Don't let this end. Let me learn the geography of your dreams. Please, Sebastian said, and his eyes never left her face as she poured fresh cups. As she added honey with the careful attention she gave to all her creations. As she settled back into her chair and tucked one leg beneath her like she was settling in for a long, important conversation. Tell me about your dreams, she said boldly, surprising herself. If you could create anything without your father's restrictions, what would you make? Sebastian's smile was radiant. bread that changes flavor based on the eater's mood. Pastries that carry the essence of different seasons, not just pumpkin spice, but the actual feeling of October mornings or May afternoons. Desserts that help people process grief, celebrate love, find courage. That's exactly what I do, Amara breathed. I just never had words for it that beautiful. Then maybe, Sebastian said, his voice low and warm and full of possibility. We could dream together. The suggestion hung in the air between them like spun sugar, sweet and fragile and full of potential. Amara felt her heart begin to race as she imagined what that might mean, sharing this sacred space with someone who understood. Creating alongside hands that moved with the same reverence she brought to her work. No longer carrying the weight of her grandmother's legacy alone. I'd like that, she whispered. And the words felt like the beginning of something that would change everything. The eastern sky had begun to blush with the faintest hint of dawn when Sebastian helped Tamara prepare the morning's first batch of healing breads. They moved together in her kitchen with surprising synchronicity, as if they'd been dancing this dance for years rather than hours. Every brush of fingers as they passed ingredients, every moment when he reached around her to access the spice cabinet, sent sparks of electricity through the warm air. Like this? Sebastian asked, his breath tickling her ear as he leaned close to watch her knead intention into the dough. His chest pressed against her shoulder, and Amara had to concentrate on keeping her breathing steady as warmth radiated from the point of contact throughout her entire body. Perfect, she managed, acutely aware of how his hands mirrored her movements. Learning the rhythm of push and fold and turn that transformed simple ingredients into something magical. You have natural instincts for this. Feel how the dough responds to your touch. Sebastian's hands stilled for a moment, and when Amara glanced up, she found his eyes dark with something that made her pulse flutter. I feel how everything responds to your touch, he said quietly. The dough, the herbs, the whole kitchen seems to come alive when you work. Heat flooded Amara's cheeks, and she found herself caught in the intensity of his gaze. They were standing so close she could count the gold flecks in his brown eyes. Could feel the warmth radiating from his skin, could breathe in his scent of night air and something uniquely him that made her dizzy with want. Amara, he whispered, and her name on his lips sounded like a song, like a prayer, like the beginning of something that would rewrite both their stories. The moments stretched between them, taut with possibility, until the timer for the morning pastries chimed softly and broke the spell. Amara stepped back, her heart hammering against her ribs, and busied herself with pulling golden croissants from the oven while trying to regain her composure. These smell incredible, Sebastian said, and his voice was slightly rough around the edges. What intention did you bake into them? New beginnings, Amara replied without thinking, then blushed furiously as she realized what she'd revealed. I always make them on Sunday mornings, for people starting fresh weeks, but tonight I was thinking about. She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. About what? Sebastian asked gently, moving to stand beside her as she arranged the croissants on cooling racks. About how everything feels different now, she admitted, not daring to look at him. About how meeting you has made me feel like maybe I'm not meant to do this alone anymore. Sebastian went very still beside her. Amara, look at me. She turned, and the expression on his face made her breath catch. There was wonder there and something deeper that made her feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. I've been walking these streets for months, he said, his voice low and intense, every night, searching for something I couldn't name. And tonight I found you, creating miracles in the darkness, pouring your heart into pastries that taste like love itself. Do you think that's coincidence? I don't believe in coincidence, Amara whispered. whispered. Nana taught me that the universe has its own timing, its own way of bringing together what belongs together. Then maybe, Sebastian said, reaching out to trace a streak of flower from her cheek with infinite gentleness. The universe has been preparing us for each other. His touch was feather light, but it sent shockwaves through her entire system. Amara leaned into his palm without conscious thought, her eyes fluttering closed as his thumb stroked across her skin with reverent care. Sebastian, she breathed, and opened her eyes to find him watching her with an expression of such tender hunger that her knees nearly buckled. I know this is happening fast, he said, his other hand coming up to cradle her face like she was something precious and fragile. But I feel like I've been waiting my whole life for this moment for you. Is that crazy? If it's crazy, then we're both lost, Amara replied, covering his hands with hers. Because I feel it too. This recognition, like my soul has been calling to yours across the darkness. They swayed closer together, drawn by gravity older than thought, until there was barely an inch of space between them. Amara could feel the warmth radiating from his body, could count each of his heartbeats in the pulse point at his throat, could taste possibility on the air between them. I want to kiss you, Sebastian confessed, his forehead resting against hers. But I'm afraid that if I do, I'll never want to stop. Maybe that's not something to be afraid of, Amara whispered, her hands fisting in the fabric of his shirt to anchor herself against the wave of want crashing through her. Sebastian made a sound low in his throat, part growl and part prayer, and his thumbs traced the curve of her cheekbones with shaking hands. Amara, the bell above the shop door chimed suddenly, and they sprang apart like guilty teenagers as Anne. Early morning jogger poked her head inside, drawn by the scent of fresh pastries. Sorry, are you open? I know it's early, but those croissants smell like heaven. Of course, Amara managed, her voice only slightly breathless as she moved to serve her customer. New beginnings croissants, perfect for Sunday morning, as she wrapped the pastry and made change. Amara was hyper-aware of Sebastian watching her work, of the way the morning light streaming through the windows caught the gold in his eyes, of how natural it felt to have him here in her space, part of the rhythm of serving her community. When the customer left, they found themselves alone again, but the moment felt different now, charged with interrupted possibility, with the memory of almost kisses and confessions that hung in the air like incense. I should probably go, Sebastian said reluctantly, glancing at the clock. My family will expect me for Sunday dinner, and if I'm not there, he shrugged, but Amara could see the weight of obligation in his shoulders. Of course, she agreed, though disappointment settled heavy in her chest. Your family needs you. But I need this too, Sebastian said fiercely, crossing to where she stood behind the counter. I need you, this connection, whatever this is that's happening between us. Tell me I can come back tomorrow night. Tomorrow and every night, Amara said without hesitation. I'll be here, and there will always be tea and whatever pastry my heart tells me to make for you. Sebastian smiled, then radiant and full of promise. Then this isn't goodbye. This is just until tomorrow. He leaned across the counter, and for a moment Amara thought he might kiss her after all. Instead, he pressed his lips to her knuckles in a gesture so old-fashioned and romantic that her heart nearly stopped. The touch was chaste, but the heat in his eyes as he looked at her over their joined hands was anything but. Until tomorrow, Amara, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Dream of pastries we could create together. Dream of healing the world one recipe at a time, she replied, and watched him walk away into the London morning with the sure knowledge that everything in her life had just changed irrevocably. As his figure disappeared around the corner, Amara touched her fingers to her lips and wondered if she would taste his almost kiss in everything she baked until she saw him again. The thought made her smile as she began preparing for the days. Customers, humming under her breath as she worked, her heart full of possibility and her hands already planning the perfect pastry to welcome him home tomorrow night. 3 weeks had passed since that first magical night, and Sebastian had become as much a part of Amara's midnight routine as the herbs she steeped and the intentions she kneaded into rising dough. Each evening brought him to her door at the stroke of midnight, and each morning brought the sweet torture of watching him leave. The space between them crackling with unspoken longing that grew stronger with every shared laugh. Every brush of fingers, every moment their eyes met and held just a heartbeat too long, tonight. London wore November like a velvet cloak, with mist swirling through the empty market streets and the first hint of winter's bite in the air. Amara had spent the day preparing something special, a batch of pastries unlike any she'd ever attempted. Infused with intentions so deep and personal that her hands had trembled as she shaped each one, Sebastian arrived as the church bells finished chiming 12. His cheeks flushed from the cold and his eyes bright with the anticipation that had become their shared addiction. But tonight something was different. There was a tension in his shoulders, a weight in his expression that made Amara's heart skip with concern. "What's wrong?" she asked immediately, drawing him inside and pressing a warm mug of spiced tea into his hands before he'd even shed his coat. Sebastian was quiet for a long moment, his fingers wrapped around the mug like an anchor. "My father wants to announce the succession next month," he said finally. "He's planning a big celebration, inviting all our oldest customers, the food critics. Everyone who matters in London's baking community." Amara felt something cold settle in her stomach. "And you'll accept?" "He expects me to." Sebastian's voice was flat, defeated. "For generations of Romano men have run that bakery. The weight of all that history, all those expectations." He looked up at her with eyes that held a universe of conflict. "But accepting means giving up everything we've talked about. No experimentation, no healing pastries, no," he gestured helplessly around her sanctuary. "No magic." Amara set down her own mug and moved to sit beside him, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body, close enough to see the gold flecks in his brown eyes that had become as familiar as her own reflection. "What does your heart tell you to do?" "My heart tells me to run away with you," Sebastian said with raw honesty that made her breath catch. "To find some cottage by the sea where we could bake bread for fishermen and heal tourists' homesickness with pastries that taste like their childhood memories." The image he painted was so vivid, so achingly beautiful that Amara could almost taste salt air and hear seagulls calling. "Sebastian, I know it's impossible," he continued, his voice breaking slightly. "You have your grandmother's legacy here, your community, everything you've built. And I have 4 generations of family expectations crushing down on me. But God, Amara, these past 3 weeks have been the most alive I've ever felt." Amara reached for his hands, threading their fingers together with the easy intimacy that had developed between them like morning glory vines reaching toward sunlight. "Who says it's impossible?" Sebastian stared at her, hope and disbelief warring in his expression. "You can't be serious. Leave all this? Your bakery? Your customers who depend on you?" "I'm not saying we have to run away," Amara said carefully, her heart hammering as she voiced thoughts that had been growing in her mind for days. "But maybe there's another path. What if we created something together? Here in London, but something that honored both our dreams?" Before Sebastian could respond, Amara rose and moved to the display case, returning with a small plate that held a single pastry unlike anything she'd ever made before. It looked like a miniature work of art, layers of delicate phyllo dough wrapped around a filling that seemed to glow with inner light, dusted with what appeared to be actual gold powder that caught the candlelight like captured stars. "I made this for you," she said, settling back beside him. "It's called a soul recognition pastry, something I've never attempted before because the intention required is so specific, so powerful." Sebastian looked at the pastry, then at her face, reading the nervous hope in her expression. "What intention did you bake into it?" "Truth," Amara whispered. "The courage to speak what's in your heart, to acknowledge what you really want, even when it scares you. Even when it means changing everything with infinite care." Sebastian lifted the pastry and took a bite. Flavor exploded across his tongue, honey and cardamom and rose water. Yes, but underneath it all, something that tasted like destiny, like recognition, like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. His eyes closed as the pastry dissolved on his tongue, leaving behind not just sweetness but clarity so sharp it took his breath away. When he opened his eyes, they were bright with unshed tears and something deeper than hope. "I love you," he said, the words falling between them like shooting stars. "I love the way you pour your whole soul into everything you create. The way you see magic where others see ordinary ingredients. The way you've made me believe that food can be medicine and art and prayer all at once." Amara's heart stopped, restarted, began beating double time as joy flooded through her like warm honey. "Sebastian, I love how you talk to your herbs like old friends," he continued, the words pouring out of him like water from a broken dam. "I love that you wear flower in your hair like a crown and that you see healing where others see business. I love that you saved me from a life of beautiful emptiness and showed me what it means to create with purpose. I love you too," Amara breathed, the confession torn from her chest with force that surprised them both. "I love your gentle hands and your artist's soul and the way you taste intention in everything I make. I love that you really see me not just the successful bakery owner, but the woman who talks to her grandmother's photograph and believes in magic even when the world tells her she's foolish." Sebastian set the plate aside with shaking hands and reached for her, pulling her into his lap with desperate tenderness. "Say it again," he whispered against her temple. "I love you," Amara repeated, her arms winding around his neck as she pressed herself against him, finally allowing herself to sink into the warmth and strength she'd been craving for weeks. "I love you, Sebastian Romano, and I don't care if it's too fast or too crazy or completely impossible. Nothing about us is impossible," Sebastian said fiercely, his hands framing her face as he pulled back to look at her. "We're magic together, Amara. What we create, what we could build. What are you saying?" she asked, though her heart was already racing with possibility. "I'm saying let's create something extraordinary," Sebastian said, his thumbs tracing the curve of her cheekbones with reverent care. "A bakery that combines your healing traditions with my family's techniques. Something that honors the past while embracing the future. Something that's ours, but your father, the expectations, can go to hell," Sebastian said with conviction that surprised them both. For generations of Romano men followed the same path, but maybe it's time for a Romano to create a new one. With the woman he loves, in a kitchen that smells like cardamom and possibility. Amara laughed, the sound bright with tears and joy and relief so profound it made her dizzy. "You're serious? You'd really give up everything for this? For us?" "I'm not giving up anything," Sebastian corrected, his forehead resting against hers. "I'm choosing everything. I'm choosing love and magic and a future where we heal the world one pastry at a time. Kiss me," Amara whispered, the words escaping before she could think better of them. Please, Sebastian, I've been waiting so long. Sebastian's response was a sound caught between prayer and growl as his mouth found hers at last. The kiss was everything Amara had dreamed and more gentle but insistent, tender but hungry, full of 3 weeks of longing and the promise of forever. His lips moved against hers like he was memorizing her taste, like he wanted to drink in her very essence. And Amara felt herself melting into him like sugar dissolved in warm cream when they finally broke apart, both breathing hard. Sebastian rested his forehead against hers and smiled with such radiant happiness that Amara felt her heart might burst from the beauty of it. So what happens now? She asked, her fingers tangling in the dark hair at the nape of his neck. Now we plan our future, Sebastian said, pressing soft kisses to her temple, her cheek, the corner of her mouth. We find a space big enough for both our dreams. We combine your healing recipes with my family's techniques. We create something London has never seen before. Romano and Okafor Healing Bakery, Amara murmured, testing the words on her tongue. Okafor and Romano, Sebastian countered with a grin. Your grandmother's legacy comes first. I'm just honored to be part of continuing it. Amara kissed him then, soft and sweet and full of promises that tasted like cardamom and forever. Around them, the candles flickered in approval, and she could swear she felt her grandmother's blessing settling over them like a warm shawl. I love you, she whispered against his lips. I love you too, he replied, and the words felt like coming home. Like the answer to every prayer she'd ever whispered into rising dough. Like the beginning of magic beyond anything she'd ever dared to dream outside. London slept peacefully, unaware that in a small bakery in Borough Market, two souls had recognized their perfect match and chosen to build something beautiful together. But inside, surrounded by the scent of healing herbs and the promise of shared tomorrows, Amara and Sebastian held each other close and planned the kind of love story that would feed both hearts and souls for generations to come. 6 months later, the grand opening of Okafor and Romano Healing Bakery had become the talk of London's culinary scene. Food critics raved about pastries that seemed to understand exactly what each customer needed, while regular patrons whispered about the magic that happened when the Nigerian healing traditions met Italian artisanal techniques, under the guidance of two bakers so obviously in love that their joy was baked into every creation. But tonight, long after the last customer had departed with bags full of therapeutic treats and healing breads, Amara and Sebastian moved through their shared kitchen in the comfortable rhythm they'd developed over months of creating magic together. The expanded space hummed with contentment, herbs hanging from rafters that now supported both her grandmother's original recipes and handwritten cards from Sebastian's great-grandmother. Their traditions blending as seamlessly as butter folded into perfect pastry dough. The emotional balanced biscotti turned out perfectly, Sebastian murmured, wrapping his arms around Amara's waist from behind as she arranged tomorrow's display. His chin rested on her shoulder, and she could feel his smile against her cheek as he watched her work. Mrs. Henderson said they helped her sleep through the night for the first time since her husband passed. Amara leaned back into his warmth, marveling as she did every day at how perfectly they fit together, not just physically, but in every way that mattered. Your great-grandmother's Anna's technique combined with Nana's lavender and chamomile, she said softly. I think they would have been friends, our grandmothers. I think they're probably conspiring together wherever they are now, Sebastian said, pressing a gentle kiss to the sensitive spot just below her ear that made her shiver with pleasure. Making sure we have everything we need to keep their legacies alive, they'd face challenges, of course. Sebastian's father had been furious about the departure from family tradition, though he'd eventually come around when he saw how happy his son was and how successfully the new bakery honored both families' contributions. Some customers had been skeptical of the healing aspects, but even the most pragmatic Londoners found it hard to argue with pastries that genuinely made them feel better. "What should we make for tomorrow's midnight special?" Amara asked, though she already knew the answer. They developed a tradition of creating one unique pastry each night, something that captured the energy of their combined intentions and the deep love that had become the secret ingredient in everything they touched. "I was thinking," Sebastian said, his hands moving to cover hers as she worked, "something for new love. There's a young couple who've been coming in every morning this week, sharing a single croissant and looking at each other like they've discovered fire." Amara smiled, remembering her own fire discovery with this man whose heartbeat had become the rhythm her own heart danced to. "Honey cakes with rose petals and a touch of cinnamon for passion, and cardamom for opening the heart," Sebastian added, his voice warm with the shared understanding that had become their foundation. "The way you opened mine that first night," she turned in his arms, her hands coming up to frame his beloved face more familiar now than her own reflection, marked with flower dust and the lines that came from spending your days smiling. "I love our life," she said simply. "I love what we've built together, even though it means working until midnight every night." Sebastian teased, though his eyes were soft with adoration. "Especially because it means working until midnight with you," Amara replied, rising on her toes to brush her lips against his. The kiss was gentle, familiar, but no less electric than that first time 6 months ago when they'd finally stopped fighting the gravitational pull between them. Sebastian sighed against her mouth, the sound pure contentment. "Come on then, love. Let's make some magic for tomorrow's young lovers." They worked together in perfect synchronization, Sebastian measuring out flour and sugar while Amara prepared the honey that would carry their intentions. The kitchen around them glowed with warmth not just from the ovens, but from the love that had transformed this space into something more beautiful than either of them could have imagined alone. "Do you ever miss it?" Amara asked as she drizzled golden honey into the mixing bowl, watching it catch the light like liquid sunshine. "The certainty of following the path already laid out for you?" Sebastian paused in his work, considering the question with the thoughtfulness she'd learned to treasure. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity of not having to choose," he admitted. "But I've never missed the path itself. This," he gestured around their kingdom of healing pastries and shared dreams. "This feels like coming home to myself. Like becoming who I was always meant to be, even when your father still grumbles about breaking tradition." "Especially then," Sebastian grinned, adding rose petals to the mixture with careful precision. "Because we didn't break tradition, we honored it by letting it grow, by adding our own love to what came before. That's what tradition is supposed to do, evolve with each generation while keeping the heart intact, as they kneaded intention into dough that would become tomorrow's gifts to young love." Amara felt the familiar peace that settled over her during these quiet hours when London slept and they created small miracles together. The exhaustion of long days serving customers who depended on them for both sustenance and comfort faded away, replaced by the deeper satisfaction of work done with purpose and love. "I have something for you," Sebastian said suddenly, his hands stilling on the dough as nervous energy replaced his usual confidence. "It's not my birthday," Amara laughed, but something in his expression made her heart skip. "It's not that kind of something," Sebastian said, wiping his hands clean before reaching into his apron pocket. It's just, I saw this at the antique market last week, and it made me think of you, of us, of what we're building together. He pulled out a small wooden spoon, clearly old but lovingly maintained, its handle worn smooth by decades of use. Carved into the wood were symbols that looked familiar, herbs and flowers intertwined with what appeared to be traditional Italian knotwork. It belonged to someone's grandmother, Sebastian explained, his voice soft with reverence. The vendor said it was made by a woman who believed cooking was the most sacred act, who put love into every dish she prepared for her family. Amara took the spoon with trembling hands, running her fingers over the carved symbols that seemed to pulse with warmth. Sebastian, it's beautiful. But you didn't need to. I wanted you to have something that connects us to all the grandmothers who came before, Sebastian interrupted gently. All the women who understood that food is love made tangible, that healing can happen in kitchens filled with intention and care. I wanted you to know that what we do here, what you taught me to do, is part of something much larger than ourselves. Tears pricked at Amara's eyes as she cradled the spoon against her chest. I can feel it, she whispered. The love that was put into this, all the meals it helped create, all the hearts it helped heal, just like yours, Sebastian said, moving to stand behind her again, his arms encircling her waist as they both gazed down at the precious gift. Just like the healing you pour into everything we make together. They stood like that for a long moment, surrounded by the sense of rising dough and brewing possibilities, holding a piece of history that connected them 2 generations of love made manifest through food. Outside, London breathed in its ancient rhythm, but inside their sanctuary, time moved differently, measured in heartbeats and shared breath and the quiet certainty that they were exactly where they belonged. The honey cakes are ready for the oven, Amara said eventually, though she made no move to leave the circle of Sebastian's arms. 5 more minutes, he murmured against her hair. Let me hold you for 5 more minutes before we have to be bakers again. Right now, I just want to be the man who gets to love you. Amara melted back against him, the wooden spoon warm in her palm and Sebastian's heartbeat steady against her spine. I love you too, she whispered. I love this life we've built, these dreams we've made real, this magic we create together forever. Sebastian asked, the single word carrying the weight of proposal, of promise, of a future measured in shared midnights and healing pastries and love that grew stronger with each passing day. Forever, Amara confirmed, and felt him smile against her hair as their future stretched out before them like dough ready to be shaped into something beautiful. The oven timer chimed softly, calling them back to their work, but they moved together now with the lazy contentment of lovers who knew they had all the time in the world. Tomorrow would bring new customers to heal, new pastries to create, new opportunities to pour their love into edible magic that would feed both bodies and souls. But tonight, in the gentle darkness that cradled their kingdom of flower and sweetness and dreams made manifest, Amara and Sebastian worked side by side, their love seasoning everything they touched, their laughter mixing with the yeast to help tomorrow's bread rise with joy, their shared contentment settling over Borough Market like a blessing that would feed their community for generations to come. And somewhere in the space between midnight and morning, between what was and what would be, their hearts beat in perfect rhythm with the pulse of rising dough and the eternal promise that love, when properly tended, can transform the most ordinary ingredients into miracles that taste like forever. Sweet dreams, dear listener. May your own heart find its perfect match in the magical hours when the world sleeps and dreams take flight.